Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Welcome to the Game of Thrones pre-show, episode 3. I've got a fantastic guest for you today. He is the preeminent polymath of. Well, I have no idea what's going on here, but I'll let him introduce himself. Joe Magician.
What's a polymath, Robert? I've never heard this word.
Someone who's an expert at many things.
Oh, jack of all trades. Oh, Joe of all trades. New name. Nailed it. Hey, everybody. Yep, Joe Magician from my own Joe Magician YouTube channel. And what are the other parts of my titles? The feature writer for Watchers on the Wall, co-host of Maester Monthly, and Reddit mod. So if you end up on the Song of Ice and Fire board and you mess up tonight, guess who's throwing a hammer your way? It's this guy.
Excellent. Well, guys, we have got a lot to talk about today. As always on these pre-shows, I'm going to try and keep it at 2 hours or as close to 2 hours as I possibly can, so everyone's got a chance to go away, grab a bite to eat before the show itself. If we possibly can, we're going to look both back at last episode and also forward to next episode. And we're going to pick up as many questions as we can from the chat as we go. But I want to start very quickly. We did have a few super chats before we went live. I just want to quickly thank people for them. So Christy Miller, thank you so much. Just saying, amazing job. Keep up the great work. Thank you. Biscovity, just sending some appreciation for your work. Won't be able to watch this live. I will watch the episode tomorrow, 2 o'clock Helsinki time, and we'll come back to this video with eyes swollen from crying. Oh no, this is going to be a theme. This is going to be a rough episode, guys. Morally 3, a very generous super chats. Thank you. Saying, here's to episode 3 and the battle at Winterfell. Would love to see more of Ghost Nymeria and her pack playing more of the role of the battle besides the dragons. Hope that Tyrion, after listening to Bran's story, has a plan to help in the Night King's defeat. And also for Joe Magician and all the excellent content on his channel, and for the mods. Yes, thank you, mods. I really appreciate what you do. But let's start off, Joe, then. This will pick up from Maura's comment. What is it that you're most, what's your overarching thought about this episode coming up soon? What should we be looking out for?
Well, there's kind of a motif or an arc that they've used in the last couple of seasons where they really like showing the guys you want to win having like a good start. They're doing great. And then all of a sudden, like with Cersei, where, oh no, Dany's doing great. Oh no, they sacked Casterly Rock, but there was nobody there. Oh no, we lost Highgarden and Olenna, and all these other terrible things happen where they're probably going to play a lot with our expectations, especially because they had the characters all say their plans for this episode. And this is a law, Robert, of TV. If a character says their plan out loud, it won't happen. So they're going to use that to play with your expectations and just the idea that they're going to build you up a little bit before they take your knees out and people just start dying in horrible ways. Because we've really only seen the plans from one side. We have no idea what the White Walkers are planning, other than the fact that they are all lined up and have a dragon somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with that big thing. So I think we're all agreed it's not going to go according to their plan. The Night King's not just going to come swanning out in his dragon and then get attacked by Jon and Dany on their dragons and die in dragonfire. That's not the way that this is going to pan out. Are there any of these big twists I've seen around? I'm sure we've all seen them around, people saying, the Night King's going down to King's Landing, or perhaps the Night King's attacking up through the crypts at Winterfell, or there's 101 these different theories. What is your best guess at what the kind of the twist is from the Night King's perspective?
What is his twist? I think his twist is going to be I imagine there's some kind of wards around the crypts of Winterfell in some way, but you know where there's not wards, Robert? In the Lich Yard, right outside, where all the servants are buried, where Lady's buried, all these other different characters. Where, if you think about this as kind of like a more brutal battle of Helm's Deep, at some point one of the walls is going to explode. They're going to rush in, and at that point, I imagine the Night King is just going to walk in, or one of the White Walkers is, and just start raising all the people, especially those that Theon killed. That might be really awful for Theon. Many of the people he killed in his sack and that Ramsay killed afterwards would not have gone into the crypts. They're all right there. And that's going to be pretty horrible. And he's probably going to use a lot of shock value, where I went through and just made like an informal list of all the characters who have died and were not burned, and some of them are like Hodor and Bloodraven and Jojen. Well, no, Jojen was. I'm sorry. Summer. A lot of these characters north of the Wall, especially during Bran's journey, he really seems to like messing with people's emotions and using fear tactics. And seeing these characters come back to life, I don't know if they will. Maybe they will. It would have been hard to get it past the people up there watching the sets, but they were there for 55 days a night or something crazy like that. So it's totally possible they snuck these people in. I think a lot of people are just expecting the gut punches to come from characters dying. I think it's the characters returning that are going to be the real gut punches.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that completely. The one thing I'm not so sure on about is the idea that about the wards in Winterfell. Now, in the books, yes, I think that's absolutely the case. They've made it very clear this is a very magical place. On the show, they've not built that up so much. They didn't mention it in their plans. They didn't sort of say, oh, well, actually, there's magical wards around the crypts. They just said it's safe there. So I wonder whether they're just ignoring that. It would seem quite odd to bring it up in the episode and then break it down. It's the kind of thing they normally tee up a little bit earlier than that. But I do very much agree that the idea that the Night King, when he comes in, is going to raise characters that we know. They're going to be characters who fall on the field then, so expect, and I'm sure we'll get to it, some of the people we're thinking are going to die are going to come back, and also some of the people who've died in the recent past as well. You mentioned the Lich Yard. For those who don't know, this is like effectively it's a standard graveyard right next to the entrance to the crypts, but it's where the loyal retainers to the Starks are buried. So that's, I think they buried, I think you said Lady Sansa's direwolf is there as well. So exactly. So there's a lot of characters that we may well know who are there. A couple of other super chats I quickly want to pick up on. Brian Price saying, can't wait, neither can I. It seems like a long time between the episodes, but we're nearly there. And Ma Rion, thank you. That's incredibly 3 very generous super chats. Thank you so much. Saying, for Robert, I'm in Germany and I have to get some sleep. My alarm clock will ring at 2 a.m. to watch the episode. Wow, it's dedication. Thank you for your work. Greetings all and enjoy the chat. Also for Joe, his after show live chat will be too late for me, but I will watch it tomorrow. Thank you, Matt. And finally, a big thank you to all the mods. So yes, thank you, mods. Matt, we'll talk about the post-show live streams in a moment, but do you just want to just let us know just a quick plug for what it is you do after the show?
Sure. So right after the episode, like 5 minutes afterwards, go live on my channel for about an hour. Last week it was with Manu or Manucular Bomb. He's one of the co-hosts of A Scene of Ice and Fire. And tonight it's going to be Gray Area, who she might be wearing her wolf mask. I don't know. I'm hoping she does, because that's one of my favorite things in the world. But yeah, we just sort of do a rapid reaction. I've sort of thought of those as more of my reviews of the episode. I did a full one for episode 1 just because there's a lot of back and forth on it. And I wanted to be like, hey, it wasn't as terrible as you thought. But for episode 2, it was so great. I just sort of let that stream show as my review for the episode, just like the really raw emotion right afterwards.
Yeah, so guys, by now I only have people onto this show that I would highly recommend that you go and check out their content. Joe himself does some fantastic videos. In fact, Donald Peoples was saying Killing of a Ranger parts 1 and 2 were pure fire. That's the a recent video. Part 2 certainly did just a day or so ago, and part 1 was a little bit earlier. Perhaps we'll get a chance to talk about them a bit later, I hope so. But the live streams, exactly, I can't do one, I'm afraid, simply because I would die, because it's like 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning for me, and after the episode that would just be too much. So I love recommending them, and I highly recommend you going and checking out Joe Magicians. Atsilla H says, hi Robert and Joe, regarding the Iron Throne, Jon may not have a choice. The North may force him to take it, or Sansa uses it as a bargaining chip with Dany to keep the North. What are your thoughts? So this is taking us beyond this episode, really, because I think although that we will probably, I suspect, get a little bit of a continuation of that discussion between Jon and Daenerys. If you remember, they left off there, oh, by the way, I'm your nephew conversation. And just because that's when the Night King's army arrived, at the beginning-ish of this episode, we're almost certainly going to see them fly off to that hill. One of the promo shots with them was them standing on the hill looking out over the battlefield, and then they're going to be waiting. So I think we might get a little bit more of that conversation coming up there, but mostly this is going to be for the second half of the season. So, Joe, what's your sort of take on that? Do you think that people will be trying to make Jon take the throne?
I think they first have to find out. Right now, it's a pretty closed secret. It's between Bran, Sam. Whoops. That was what I was going to say next. Dany and Jon. But I said during my review that Varys and Tyrion both saw Jon on that dragon, and they are two of the world's greatest living experts on Targaryens and dragons. So if Tyrion saw you on a dragon, and only Targaryens can ride dragons, and all of a sudden Dany and Jon have a weird thing going on, I'm imagining that Tyrion's going to put together, or Bran may have just told him during their little talk afterwards that we didn't get to see conspicuously. I don't think that Jon will ever try and take the Iron Throne himself, even if people push him to. He's really, every step of the way, rejected power. He's been offered by Stannis, Winterfell. Oh, cat meowing at the door. Sorry. He was offered to be the King of the North a few times. It was really until they literally forced it on him with no other options that he finally took it. But when you look at his parallels, like I think in particular, like Duncan the Small and Jenny of Oldstones, where it seems like that's the way that Jon's going, and the advice he's given, Maester Aemon, and many other characters have basically told him, like, you have to do what's right instead of like what your heart desires. And we know from the books on his inside that Jon is a sad boy who really wants power and is pretty angry about a lot of things. But I don't really see a scenario where he would push Dany out of the way at Dance with the Dragons Part 2 coming, even though that's what Sam is pushing him towards.
Yeah, and I think that's the crucial point, is that there are people, they have been setting this up for the last season or two, there are people who would probably prefer Jon to be the monarch rather than Dany. Sam is clearly now in this camp, and he's got history in trying to push Jon into taking on responsibility. Tyrion and Varys both have had their reservations about Daenerys. They've had chats about them in private last season. And then you would expect that there are other people in the north who might also want to rally behind him. So they've clearly set this up, but I agree completely. I did a video on Jenny's song just yesterday, in fact, and the fact that they used that as the intro to that conversation between Jon and Daenerys makes me think that they are perhaps teeing up the idea that Jon may forego his claim to the throne. So if you don't get the links, then by all means check out that video. But basically, it's a song about some characters of the past, one of whom gave up the throne for love. It's more complicated, but that's where I think that they're going to be going.
There's also the scene during the last episode where Dany and Sansa were talking about Jaime, and Jon basically had his heels up on the desk like he was like a high schooler, like a high school senior, just waiting for the time to run out. It's like Jon has really no interest in ruling anything. He really would rather leave that to other people.
Yes, absolutely. Karim Munir, thank you so much for the super chat. I didn't see a question there, but thank you. Caroline Morales saying, love your content and glad to wait with you. It's lovely being able to chat about this stuff just as we're getting excited and waiting for the episode. And Lucas Giorgio saying, was a full Stark only scene a missed opportunity? I'm assuming that you're meaning in terms of having all of the Starks together, just sort of chatting about what's going on. I'll tell you the thing that I think is the missed opportunity, which they finally got to, is anybody asking Bran what on earth he was doing. What was his story? What was going on? Yeah. It seems like suddenly Tyrion's the only person who actually says, so what has been going on with you? And everyone else just seems to accept the fact that he's just been a little bit weirdy-beardy recently. So that was the scene that I really wanted, rather than just Jon giving Bran a hug and then Sansa giving her a look to say, yeah, he's a bit weird now. That I wanted a bit more of that. But Linda Prostuta, thank you for a very generous super chat. With the memories words we heard in episode 2, do you think Archmaester Ebros's words to Sam that we are this world's memories turn out to be the Night King destroying the Citadel in Old Town, unless it's protected by magic? Now, this is I've seen this as another one of those ideas about what the Night King may be up to, and I love this idea, this link across that if the Night King's trying to destroy the world's memories, yes, Bran is there as a sort of this data bank of the world's memories, but also that's where Old Town think of themselves. And in the books, I think it has been set up with the idea that Old Town will burn, not necessarily by the Night King, perhaps by Euron in the books. But what do you think, Matt? Do you think that the Night King will go and burn Old Town?
It's a good question because, especially in Fire and Blood, George wrote quite a lot about the Targaryens taking their dragons to Old Town and not so subtly threatening to burn the entire thing down. Like Jaehaerys and Alysanne did that when he was trying to push his exceptionalism thing. Maegor the Cruel did it quite a few times, just forcing his way through it. So the idea of a dragon going to Old Town is pretty well set up at this point. There's also that weird prophecy from the High Septon when Aegon landed, where he decided that the Faith would never take arms against the Targaryens because, what was it, like, if they did, the Starry Sept would burn down or something weird like that. I forget the exact wording, but it was basically that. In the books, I definitely think Euron's pegged to do that. It seems like for quite a while. This was from my fellow Maester Monthly co-host, Bookshelf Stud, his essay, Ripples in the Dreamscape, where he's been talking about how since basically, like, I think book 1 or 2, it's been set up that Euron's going to sack a city, and we're just like slowly getting closer and closer together until we're figuring out it's Old Town. I actually still think it will be Euron. He's got to do something. Like, he's got to do something in the rest of the season. He's not just going to ferry the Golden Company everywhere. He's ruthless. He wants power. He clearly exercised some of it by making sure that him and Cersei made the old dragon with 2 backs. So he's not going to stop there. Euron's power hungry, and Old Town is sitting there undefended. So that would be my pick. Although I could definitely see, if we get to like episode 5 or 6, and the White Walkers have basically cut a swathe across Westeros, that if the Reach and Old Town are one of those things, it's one of those like writing techniques where if you make a place that has the biggest library in a novel, you're probably going to burn it. If you make a place that is like the most bountiful place in the world, you're probably going to burn that too.
Yeah, I'd say they've built up, George R. R. Martin has built this up as a sort of the Library of Alexandria, which was the greatest library of its age, which was famously burned. And so I think that is very clearly in the books where they're going to go. And I would agree, probably not this episode. I think this episode is going to be focused in on Winterfell. But if we do get a situation where things move down south, then yes, we may well see that happen later on in the season. Sean D says, can you talk about the statues Jon, Sansa, and Arya come face to face with in the crypts of themselves? How can they be there in the same clothes, etc.? Is it a premonition or what? So this is one of the promo trailers that they did a few months ago now, when you'll probably remember it, when you get the 3 of them all walking through the crypts, and then they come and they see statues of themselves, turn around, and then this the icy mist comes towards them. My take on that is that is not footage from the season. That is not something we're going to be seeing. That is purely promo material to get us excited and to set up the idea that A, things are going to be happening in the crypts, and B, this is going to be the Starks defending Winterfell against the oncoming army of the dead. So I think they just made them for that promo. They have got a lot of money for promo stuff. And I don't think that's that we are actually going to see those 3 statues there in the show itself. But Joe, do you agree with that or not?
Yeah, that sounds right on the money. I was talking to Sue the Fury, the editor-in-chief of Watchers on the Wall, before the season started. We did a preview thing, and she told me that the people that make these promos really love trolling the fandom and giving them misleading promos and just like putting stuff in to mess with us a little bit. So obviously, if the statues are down there, it means they're going to die, right? Well, no, because the statues are not usually carved at the moment of the person's death. Like a lot of those Starks died very old, but their statues are of young men, probably like the greatest point of their lives, or whoever literally carved them. So just because they're down there does not mean they're going to be dead. There's also a funny thing that happened where a lot of people thought Jon's the statue looked way older. They're like, oh my God, John's going to be the Grey King. He's going to live forever. And actually HBO, or I think the people that made the promo, went and took a picture of that statue in normal light. And it just looks like John now. It's one of those things where people just like run with something that's just meant to get you hype.
Yeah, I think so. And similarly, then you get the other promo that was released just a week or so before the seasons opened, where you get like this snowy wasteland of Winterfell and just like long claws sticking out of the snow, and there's a broken wheelchair and all the rest of it. That is just, if you think of it as them trolling us, then that's probably pretty close.
Yeah,
It's
that was a pretty good troll.
Exactly. It's just them trying to get us excited about the season and talking about it. That's what's going on there.
Mission accomplished as we talk about it
yeah,
now.
Absolutely. We're still talking about it a month later. It must have been good. John Dawson, thank you so much for your super chat. Lucky asks, book question. There are 3 questions here, so I'm gonna throw them to you, Matt, asking for quick answers. Your thoughts on Jon and Mira being twins theory? My answer to that one is I do not think that they are. I think that Mira, this is very bookish, and I've done a video on it, so we're not going to get into it. I think Mira is Howland and Ashara's child. Number 2, Jaime being the Kingslayer. Chances he slays the Night King. I think no, I do not think that that's the case. I think in the books he's going to be the Sister Slayer, the Queen Slayer. And 3, will Dario return? Quite possibly in the books, but it's certainly not a foregone conclusion. He's still there or thereabouts. So what do you think on those ones, Matt? Jon and Mira being twins, Jaime killing the Night King, who's obviously not a book character, so that's the other thing there, and Dario returning.
Is Mira... No, she's not his twin. That whole thing, I'm sure you put this in your video, just came out because the actress looks like Kit Harington, and they just didn't really, it wasn't super important what Mira looks like, so they just picked the best person, which happened to be her, and somehow someone made a theory out of that. Not true. Definitely not. Second one, will Jaime kill the Night King? I've been wondering about this for a while. We talked about this a lot during the Maester Monthly episode, where you said quick, so I'm going to try and be quick. Where Bran was waiting for Jaime all that time outside, so he was checking up on him, and if Bran's paying attention to him, he probably has some large role. It may be like sort of like a Kingslayer thing, where it's another awful thing he does, but for a really good cause that no one ever knows about, so he goes down as a terrible person in history. And what was the third one again? I'm sorry.
The third one is Dario going to be returning?
Oh yeah, we saw Benjamin, so yeah, Dario showed back up.
I'm not going there.
We're not going to see Dario.
So yeah, I said quick. We're never quick at answering questions. But yeah, so if you want to check out my Howland and Ashara's child being Mira video, then you by all means have a look for that one, because I have more detailed thoughts than them I have time to explain now. AKA Ingmar says, do you think the Night King sent a splinter force to Winterfell and his other is going after Cersei to get a bigger army? So we covered this a little bit, but perhaps, Matt, we can pick this up on this idea a little bit more. So the theory that is out there, as I understand it, is that we didn't see the Night King at the end of last episode, and we certainly haven't seen him in the trailer. So does that mean he's gone somewhere else? Where else might he have gone? Well, obviously the biggest city, therefore the place that he could get the most additions to his army would be King's Landing. So perhaps he's gone down there with some of his army, or just on his dragon, and perhaps he's going to attack that, get an army together and march them north, and then catch the north in a pincer movement. My take is, although I love the idea that the Night King is ahead of the game on this, because he almost certainly is, because he always has been ahead of whatever the living are planning. The logistics of it just don't work for me. Just in terms of the timing, it takes months to get up north from King's Landing, so they're not going to arrive in time to get to the Battle of Winterfell, so that doesn't quite work for me. And also, if it is just him on the back of Viserion, he's burning things, then he's actually burning his army. So what he needs to do is has to go with an army to kill people that he can then raise. So logistically, that one doesn't quite work for me. But have you got a better reason than that, or are you holding out and secretly holding out on me? You think this might be what's going on?
I love messing with you, Robert. Quickly, Jojo Lady Dame just told me we have 2,500 people watching. So, hello,
Wow.
everybody.
Hi, everyone.
How's it going? So I think I heard this first from History of Westeros. I think it was Aziz's sometimes co-host Dancing Sean that I heard. I think that's the original source for this. It does make some sense that he's not going to walk into a trap, which is what Bran is setting for him. And like I said earlier, if Bran said the trap, it's not going to work the way he wants. So that kind of makes sense. But I tend to think it's more fear from him, that he was really cautious around Dany and Jon last time when Dany had her 2 dragons around. And then Bran got asked, what was it? What would happen if you tried to roast him with dragon fire? And he just kind of looked at them with like a little smirk and said, nobody's tried that before. Well, he sort of walked through fire before, so maybe what will work. But I tend to think that he knows there's going to be obsidian everywhere. There's going to be guys running around, Valyrian steel swords, swinging them around like crazy, dragons all over the place, random arrows throughout the air. I think he's just so far back. He's going to lead from the back, kind of like Tywin, and let everything else happen in front of him, and then move in at the end, because that's what we saw during Bloodraven's Cave when he stormed that. He let his whites go in first. He let his little foot soldiers go in ahead of him. A couple of them got killed. Then he showed up and swung a death blow on Bloodraven personally. At that point, I think that's where we'll finally see him. I don't think we'll see him much at all, except maybe flying around on Viserion, like pulling Dany and Jon away from the battle so that the whites can get in there.
Yeah, I think so. I don't see him as cowardly in any way. If anything, he's just incredibly cocky. But he does stay back from the action to start with, see what's going on. We saw it at Hardhome. We saw it with Bloodraven's Cave. And also we saw it in that battle north of the Wall when they were stranded on that island. But at that point, if you notice, he then walked towards the dragon. So I think the idea that he's scared of dragonfire is a little bit wide of the mark. So I think that that's not there. What I postulated in my video when I was looking at the preseason or the trailer for episode 3 was that perhaps he's going to wait and take on 1 dragon, not 2, because clearly trying to take on 2 dragons, he'd be on to a losing game there. If, however, and we seem to see Jon and Daenerys having a little bit of, if not an argument, then a disagreement about something in the trailer, if they break apart and do different things, he could take out Jon's dragon, Rhaegal, in a 1-to-1 combat. And the thought I'm going to leave you with is that most of that trailer, when we saw Jon, he was on foot. So whatever happens, Rhaegal has gone away. Something happened to Rhaegal. So we don't know what that is, but Jon, he starts off on top of a hill, clearly has flown over there. Presumably the dragons are there. But the rest of it, we see him charging through gates. He's looking moody, pulling out a sword, all on the ground. So something happens to Rhaegal in this episode. Don't know what, but it makes sense to me that it might be in a battle. There's so much in things like Fire and Blood about one dragon and another just fighting and crashing to the ground. I don't know. We'll see, but something will happen to Rhaegal, so keep an eye out for that.
Could also be that Jon sucked at writing Rhaegal, so maybe he doesn't feel comfortable going into combat. Like he is like a kid holding on for just for his life. Like, oh my god, I'm about to fall off this dragon the whole time. He's probably not ready for combat.
Absolutely. And if I were the Night King, I would target him, I have to say. Miss M Dubs saying, have the weirwoods, Bran, lured the power players north to Winterfell to protect the trees? Is that why he's forgiven Jaime and Theon so easily? I think just picking up on the forgiving Jaime and Theon so easily is that because Bran is not himself personally anymore, he's just this amalgamation of memories and the three-eyed raven. That means that he's no longer viewing it in a personal way. Hey, you pushed me out of a window or anything like that. That's not where he's coming from anymore. He's looking at the bigger picture and what is their role in the bigger picture. And he was wanting to have Theon back and he was wanting to have Jaime back. So I think that's why he's not doing there. And have they lured the power players north to Winterfell to protect the trees? Well, yes, perhaps to a certain extent, in that they are the memories. The Weirwood network are the memories that Bran is hooked up to. So yes, there's an element, but it's out in the open, and he knows that that is where they're trying to draw the Night King to. So if it is trying to protect that Weirwood, then I don't think that's a good plan. And many people, myself included, have speculated that perhaps this might end up with the burning of the Weirwoods. But what's your take on that one, Matt?
I largely agree with the idea that he does seem to be wanting to destroy everything having to do with his creation. The fact that he's going right at Winterfell kind of works with the idea that a lot of people think he may have been a Stark or a bastard Stark like Jon, something along those lines, that he wants revenge on that castle in particular. Because if you look at the map from where he punched through at Eastwatch to get to Winterfell, it's basically just straight through Last Hearth. He's not diverting anywhere. He could just go around them at any time. There's no reason he has to do this. He could even just set up an extended siege with a bunch of whites around him, like Bloodraven's Cave. So that they are attacking means it's personal. That makes a lot of sense. And like Bran was saying about how he wants to kill him personally and also the Weirwoods, kind of the memory of the world. Yeah, I could see that. I wouldn't be surprised if this episode ends with at least that one Weirwood like burning, but there's a lot more. It's not just the one in Winterfell. There's not just the one north of the wall. The two that we've seen north of the wall, they're kind of all over the place, and they actually grow kind of wild. I don't even think we saw them, the ones that Jon swore his oath in front of at the north of Castle Black. Seems like Night King just ignored those entirely, and that's a grove of 9 of them or something like that. So I think it's personal, having to do with Winterfell more than the Weirwoods and Bran.
Yes, although I think it's probably worth saying that at this point, the showrunners are trying to narrow down our focus to the things that they know that we know. And so there are things like the Isle of Faces, for example, that nerds like us are very aware. Lots of Weirwoods going on there. But on the show, they've not bigged that up. So they're almost certainly not going to make that a big element of what's happening. Winterfell, however, and the Weirwood tree there is something that has been there right from the very first episode. So that's why they're focusing on that as a sort of a symbol of the Weirwood network, would be my personal guess. Stephen Michael Davis, goofy theory. Always good to flag up when your theories are goofy. Bran time travels to prevent these events from unfolding. The alternative timeline is actually the original pilot that never aired. I put it at a 0.1 probability. What say you? I say that is very generous, 0.1 probability.
That's high.
Yes, exactly. I think that the time travel thing I will pick up on very briefly, though, because although I like the theory, sorry, I should say, but the time travel thing, in my understanding of how time works within this universe, is that it's done on this kind of closed loop, and I can never quite get the causality right on this one, but it's something like everything that is going to happen has already have happened. So, for example, you get the closed loop of Hodor. He already, in the past, something happened which is making what happened in the future actually happen. You cannot break out of that. The moment Hodor is Hodor, he is always going to have been holding the door, because that's the way that works. The fact that when, in a smaller example, when Ned turns around because he hears somebody calling his name at the Tower of Joy, he always did that, because Bran always came back. So you going back in time creates a closed loop, not a new timeline that goes off somewhere else. I talked about this with Gemma from Secret Citadel in another video ages ago, if you're interested in that. Geese Mulders saying the plan is to kill the Night King and disable the whites he raised. But what about the whites raised by the other White Walkers? Will they also die, or do they have to kill all the White Walkers? Well, on this one, and I'll come to Matt in case he's got a different understanding from this, on this, the way they've explained it to us, we don't have the absolute knowledge of exactly how this works, but the way they've explained it to us, both Beric and then Bran, is that when you kill a White Walker, any of the whites that are being controlled by that walker will then collapse. But it's like a domino effect. At the top of this, the Night King created the White Walkers. And so if you destroy him, then the White Walkers that he created will die or collapse, and then all the whites that they control die or collapse. And so that's why they're going for the Night King, because they think that that will have a ripple effect out. Basically, you kill the Night King, and if they go with this, then it would look spectacular. You kill the Night King, and then just suddenly everyone just collapses. And that's the theory that they're working on. But first of all, do you agree that that's the theory they're working on? And secondly, do you think that's right?
Yes, that is the theory they're working on. They had John say it, although the fact that you have John say it maybe implies that maybe it's not totally correct, because
he does not know much, does he?
he doesn't know much. Yeah, just the org chart idea, I think, is how it works. Although there's one important one important thing about the Night King that's very different from all of his servants, or Craster's sons, I guess. That's what they are at this point. They're all Craster's kids. They all got the thing where they were touched by the Night King, and then they turned into White Walkers at that point. The same with Viserion. But the Night King has that arrow, that spearhead of obsidian shoved in his chest, and it's probably still there. I talked about this in my Whisper Jewels video about how this is a concept from George's other works, where he likes the idea that like gems and obsidian and swords and stuff can like hold souls and consciousness. So killing him is probably going to be a lot harder than the other ones, where John essentially just swung his sword once and took him out like a bunch of punks. He's walked through fire. He seems unafraid of most things at this point. So whatever they're thinking about, like I imagine their plan is like, if we can just like hit him with some obsidian, it'll all be over. There's no way it's going to be that easy, I don't think. And like, no. I'm not even sure what will happen to the rest of them, because if it's actually like a Whisper Jewel situation where it's controlled actually from the obsidian, the body doesn't matter. It's the soul inside of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, so just to pick up on that, how to kill the Night King, which could take a whole episode to discuss, I'm sure. But I'm absolutely sure that you're right, that it's not just going to be, hey, we'll try and kill him like a normal White Walker. There's something more. He has to somehow be uncreated, in my view, whether that's just reverse engineering his magic in some way, destroying the weirwood tree that created him, taking out the dragon glass. Maybe it's creating a special weapon which does it. This is like the Melisandre theory, that she obviously believes that there has to be Lightbringer. Is that the kind of, do you need a fiery Valyrian steel sword? Would that work? So that, I agree, there has to be something that's different and harder to kill him. And this is perhaps my hope for Tyrion, is that he may well, having had that conversation with Bran, have learned something that he could then talk to the rest of the Brains Trust, like Sam and Varys and people, when they're all cowering down in the crypts, because a big point was made about the fact that Tyrion was put down into the crypts. So that's not just a by the by. Tyrion is there for a reason. I hope that they come up with something that will serve as some sort of a weapon, because this is the biggest thing that blows my mind. They, as well as not asking Bran what on earth happened with him, nobody's actually seems to have had the conversation about how you might kill the Night King. They're still in their planning meeting having a, well, what about Dragonfire? Might that work?
The night before. It's like me in college or something.
Exactly. It's like they're cramming for trying to do an essay in one night. It's not good.
Bad. Just one more thing before we move on, just so people understand kind of the relationship of the rest of the others to the Night King. If you're a Lord of the Rings nerd, it's closer to the ring wraiths to Sauron or Morgoth. They're not on the same level. He is much different from them. And like the obsidian thing may be like his ring of power analog that that the show has written in, because there's no Night King in their books yet.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And just as completely apropos of nothing, or just following on from that link, people quite often ask me what I'm going to be doing after this season. I'm going to be carrying on doing the Game of Thrones stuff, A Song of Ice and Fire, and all the rest of it, but I am going to be branching out into Lord of the Rings stuff as well, because I am also a Lord of the Rings nerd. And
hey, me too.
The show coming out, I know, I'm going to be doing some collabs with you, I suspect, over time, but I'm going to be starting off with some book stuff and then building up towards when the TV show launches, which I'm imagining is at some point in the next couple of years. So that's something which is on the horizon for the channel. James Barkley, as we're on this subject of sort of technicalities about what's going on with White Walkers, Viserion. Ice Dragon, White or White Walker. Look at the eyes of all. He has the eyes of a White Walker, no white, only deep blue, and made with a head touch. Whites are very flammable, quick death to dragonfire. I know I have my thoughts on this subject, but I'd be fascinated to hear yours. What do you reckon, Matt? What technically, what is Viserion at the moment?
This is one that always gets me in trouble when I say it, but they've been
You're
pretty
going to come out
clear
with
that
heresy again.
I know the showrunners are pretty clear that they think Viserion's a White Walker dragon, that he's not a white, that he's not undead, that he has a mind, and he probably can raise the dead on his own if he wants to. At this point, the fact that the Night King is riding him, I don't think speaks to that he's a mindless beast. Like Drogon obviously has thoughts, and Dany rides him too. So I don't know. I just kind of take him at their word at this. It doesn't make a ton of sense in terms of book canon because George has drawn a distinction between dragons and other animals in the world because they're so magical. But if that's kind of what they say it is, then I'm just willing to accept that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you half of the way here. Is that if that's what they say on the show, then that's what it is on the show. Looking at the logic, however, that they built up around that, there are two things. Is that it seems to be that in order to be a White Walker, you have to be alive and then turned. So Craster's children are alive and then turned into White Walkers. To be a white, you have to die and then be raised again. Now, if you take that pure logic, then Viserion is a dragon white rather than a dragon white walker. My take, though, is that the dragon is a magical beast in and of itself and is therefore a completely different category. It's an anomaly, something which has not been seen before, and therefore we actually have to come up with a completely different name for it. So that's where I stand on it, which probably doesn't help because it actually says the answer to Ice Dragon, White or White Walker is possibly all three.
Maybe all three. I tend to think of it in terms of Star Wars, the original trilogy. Do you remember the powers they had for the Force for the first two movies? And you get to the third one, all of a sudden the Emperor's shooting lightning. It's like, okay, I guess you can do that now. I mean, it's like once you get the precedent, now it's a thing. They're saying it's a thing. All right, fair enough. It's your magical world.
Just go with it. Anime lover Nicole saying, I think Sam will do the same as what he did at the Battle of Castle Black. Your thoughts, will we see Mira again? I've just had a mind blank as to what Sam did at the Battle of Castle Black. Do you remember?
He let Ghost out of his cage. I think that was it. And then hid. Oh yeah, that's right, because he went to go hide Gilly, and then he found Janos Slynt pissing himself with the women in the larder. Yeah, so in this one, he is hiding to start with, so I don't think he needs to release Ghost. I think Ghost will be there and will appear alongside Jon whenever he's grounded. I think, as I say, his role is doing some thinking with Tyrion. In terms of Mira, I suspect probably not this episode. She may well appear again, but later on in the season. It seems to be that the Reeds were not summoned up to Winterfell along with everyone else, which kind of makes sense because they have got a unique strategic defensive point for the north, so it makes sense for them to stay there. Thomas Bingham saying, thanks for the great stream, Robert. Question below. Okay, I will try and find that one in just one moment. Thomas, if you put them within the super chat itself, then it's a lot easier for us to see them. But thanks, I'll go and have a look for that. Mark Parsons says, heard this and wanted your thoughts. Could Bran take the place of the Horn of Winter and raise the dead of Winterfell? This, I think, is building on my idea, not just mine. Many people have had the thought that the Horn of Winter's role is to raise the dead of Winterfell and raise them on to fight on behalf of the living. So, what's your take there? Will Bran raise the dead in the crypts? That's a good question. I've had similar thoughts about what the Horn of Winter does. It seems to sort of either raise the dead or force the dead nearby to obey you. That's kind of my headcanon on what that actually does. Otherwise, because Jon blows it, and then instantly the White Walkers attack the fist, and it was like that seems to be the trigger. something about that pissed them off. But yeah, I don't see why Bran couldn't. I mean, the Children of the Forest are able to raise Benjen into basically undeath. So I guess you could run around jamming dragon glass into the chests of the recently dead in Winterfell to prevent that. Also, the whites seem to be the whites the White Walkers control seem to be more like puppets, like psychic puppets, where they like pick up one leg, pick up the other, and walk them kind of in that way. Whereas the other kind of whites seem to be more conscious. So I I assume if Bran's a three-eyed raven, he remembers how to do that now since he remembers everything. Just go around and just make a bunch of cold hands.
Yeah, I think that's I think that makes sense to me. Let's pick up on. So I was just while we were doing that, I was trying to find the question from Thomas Bingham. I couldn't do that. I'm afraid the chat's moving through so quickly it's dropped off the top. So sorry, Thomas, about that. If one of the mods does find it, could you possibly DM me over on Twitter and I'll pick up on it and then we can answer it there. Thank you, mods, and sorry, Thomas. Smurvs says, how fast do Craster's sons grow after being turned? This is, for me, one of the biggest things that we do not understand about how the White Walkers operate, because they clearly were getting in these babies, turning them into White Walkers. Do they magically grow straight away? I actually quite like the idea that they are growing a reserve army that's then staying up in the lands of always winter, and so they're even if lots of their people die down in the south, they've got another lot who's surviving up in the north. So that kind of makes sense to me. But Matt, have you got great wisdom on this? What's the whole deal about how they age? You can please feel free to digress over into the Night King's beard as well if you want to. What's the deal? How do they get older? What's going on?
I've always loved the idea that there's like a White Walker high school where there's like little cliques and like they're getting ice pimples and they're picking on the little kids and stuff like that. I tend to think that since it seems to be some kind of form of like second life, that's kind of what I think, where it's the idea where a skin changer upon their death can go seize a new body. And I think that's kind of what's happening with the White Walkers, because they're described a number of times as mists, which we know is usually a sign that a skin changer is nearby, that they're in like their weird incorporeal form, just kind of walking around like a ghost. And that when they're converting the kids, I don't think the kid is becoming a White Walker. I think it's like what Bran was doing to Hodor, where somebody's seizing the brain. And I think the spirits of the White Walkers, the disembodied ones, essentially go into that baby, take its life force and its potential energy, and kind of, in the way they control ice elsewhere, they just make it grow up real fast into their form. Kind of like Neo in the Matrix, where it's like when he goes into the Matrix, all of a sudden he looks like the way he thinks he should. I think that's kind of what's going on there. If you just take their ability to create icy bodies, because that's kind of what they are, and second lives, which seems to be what's going on. That's my best guess.
Well, it's as good a guess as mine. I love the idea that they're up there growing up, and at the end of the season, when we think that they've been dealt with, actually we see that they're not, and then we just go to the little White Walker kindergarten up north, and we can see that give it another few thousand years, there'll be another iteration of this whole story. I like that. Not literally a White Walker kindergarten, I have to say.
It'd be awesome. What games do you think they would play? Do you think they would slide? Like they're doing the monkey bars?
I don't know. The javelin throwing, maybe?
All they do is practice Greek games.
Thomas Bingham, we've found. Thank you so much to my moderator, Lady Dane, who's picked up on the question. The question is Sansa the most likely marriage if Jon takes the throne post a white apocalypse and Dany dies? Ties up the North to the throne, bittersweet as they never liked each other. So, okay, this is a speculative question then. If Dany dies and Jon takes the throne, do you think he would be marrying Sansa?
Why do you do this to me, Robert?
I know my answer. I will. Okay, I will help out on this one. My answer is no. I think that whereas it's slightly different with Jon and Daenerys, is they grew up not knowing each other at all and then met as adults and then suddenly discovered that they were related. Jon and Sansa always thought that they were related, therefore have a sibling relationship, and therefore I don't think either of them would ever contemplate such a thing. But maybe you have a different view.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's not. The Starks have married cousins in the past, first cousins, which is what Jon and Sansa are. But like you said, they think they're siblings. That's generally more important in terms of like if people will actually go through with it. Like that's one thing that Dany and Jon have going for them, is that they just met, even though they are essentially on the same level as first cousins. I really don't want the initial pitch letter from George to come true. Let's not do this, guys. Let's not make Jon and Arya or Jon and Sansa a thing. It's just forget that ever happened. It didn't happen. I honestly think there probably won't be a united Westeros afterwards, or at least not in a sense that we recognize anymore. Like they seem to be already be going towards this idea of great councils as a governing body. Maybe they'll just keep going with that.
Yeah, I think that would be where I would go. That's a slightly big digression, but I don't think we're going to end up with the Iron Throne at the end of all of this. Benjamin Johnson saying congrats on 3,000 viewers. We're up to 3,000, are we now? I lose track.
Wow.
Over that. Thank you so much, guys. Stephen Stark saying late but here. Hi, Stephen. Actually, this gives me an opportunity to plug and I've no idea why you wouldn't wish to go and see Joe Magician's post-show live stream, but LML, I always plug LML's post-show live stream. His one is being hosted on Stephen Stark's channel this time, which is gives me an opportunity. I've been looking for opportunities to give a bit of a shout out to smaller channels to give them a boost for their live streams after the show. Stephen Stark is an excellent chap. He's been around the community for a very long time, and that actually is his real surname, apparently. He actually is a Stark. It's pure coincidence. But if you want LML and all of his myth heads and all of their wonderful, juicy chat after the show, then head over to Stephen Stark's channel. If perhaps one of the mods could drop a link in, that would be fantastic. Let's go back to Linda Prosciutto's question, which is building on a lot of the lore from the books, saying, Bael the Bard fought his son at the Frozen Ford. Could the Night King be the forgotten son? Maybe the son wasn't killed by the Boltons. So for those who don't know this story, this is a legend of Bael the Bard that has a lot of kind of application across to the Rhaegar and Lyanna story, but he it's a lot more poetic than this. I'm just giving you the bare bones. But he came into Winterfell and effectively ran off with, or kidnapped, depending on your perspective, the daughter of the Lord of Winterfell. They disappeared into the crypts of Winterfell for a year. Then she emerged with their child. That was the only heir to Winterfell. Bael the Bard disappeared, went back north of the wall. That child grew up and became the Lord of Winterfell. Years later, the two of them met the new Lord of Winterfell and his father, Bael the Bard, who was the king beyond the wall. And Bael the Bard refused to fight his own son and was killed. Now, the fate of that son, apparently much later, was to be killed by the Boltons. So that's quite a long story, as I say. I cut out all of the beauty and poetry of it. Do go and check it out. But could the Night King be the forgotten son? I like the idea because of the echo across to the Rhaegar and Lyanna story, and the son there, therefore, has a kind of a Jon hint to them. And so I like the sort of the symbolism going on there. But my feeling is no, because this is in show chronology, slightly more complicated in the books, in show chronology, then that happened after the founding of Winterfell and the building of the wall and all the rest of it, and that all happened after the first long night. So the Night King was created before that. So the chronology doesn't quite work for me on that one. But have you got any particular thoughts on that, Matt?
Oh, somehow I always have thoughts on everything. I don't know how that's happened. This is Robert's favorite game, by the way, where it's have Matt on a stream and then throw really random theory at him and then sit back and smile as I talk for like 5 minutes straight.
Well, it's so good because actually gives me one of the reasons why I love having Matt on. That's one of the reasons is the fact that he thinks at slightly different angles to many people, and I mean that as a huge compliment. I love it when people see things from slightly different perspectives. A lot of the time, people say the same kind of ideas, and there's a lot of repetition of the same kind of concepts. Matt, I sometimes accuse him of heresy because he comes out with slightly weird ideas, but they all make complete sense. And I love the way that his brain works to kind of tie up these different things. So that said, I will now sit back and let you spout your heresy.
So I have a couple of thoughts about the Night King's identity. I don't think it has much to do with Bael the Bard, although that is a very, I think, important story for telling us how the Northerners are much more intermarried than anyone thinks, where basically everyone's a Stark in the North at this point. But my two leading theories are the original story we get from Old Nan is that he was probably a Stark of Winterfell, probably a bastard like Jon, because it turns out she hints his name is Brandon, and Old Nan is basically always right. So if he's a Brandon, he's probably a Brandon Snow, and then he gets defeated by Brandon the Breaker, the Lord of Winterfell. So how do you end up with two Brandons who are both Starks? You don't. So one of them's the bastard son, one of them's the real son. And it's a real strong parallel between Robb and Jon, where obviously one went up to be the Lord Commander, the other one became King of the North. It works pretty well. The other one I really like for the Night King's identity is this character called the Warg King. He ruled from the Wolfswood and Sea Dragon Point, probably the progenitor of House Blackwood. They went to war with the Starks of Winterfell. The Starks beat them, took all their women, and then nobody really knows what happened to the Warg King. And it seems implied that this is where the Starks got their warging powers from, stealing their women after the battle. But it would make a ton of sense if somebody who was just defeated by the Starks, who may be a bastard from the Starks because he's in the Wolfswood, went up to the children and made a Faustian bargain where it's like, help me get my revenge at any cost. And they're like, yeah, any cost? Okay, we'll see how far you'll go. And they turn him into the Night King. Because that seems to be what the actor Vladimir Furtick seems to be relating to about the creation of the Night King. He did not want to become what he is, and he was in over his head. I can definitely see that happening if this is like a character like the Warg King, who really doesn't understand what the children are about to do to him.
Yeah, the other thing Vladimir Furtick said is that no one knows who he was. Was he a lord? Was he a commoner? As far as he's concerned, it doesn't matter who he was. He was just a person who got turned into the Night King. So it's possible that he was kind of trolling us a little bit with that, but my personal feeling is because he's not been like a professional actor, he was a stunt person, or I don't know what the technical term is, but he's the prosthetics guy who was a White Walker previously and does all the monsters and things like that. He's not there used to having all these questions asked about motivations of characters and all the rest of it. And I give a little bit more credence to what he's saying because he's a lot less guarded than some of the main actors are on this. And he seems to think it doesn't matter who he was before. It's who he is now that's the issue.
Just like you were saying, just because he was a stuntman who got upgraded because the original actor went to go do plays and stuff like that. I imagine that interview he never does interviews, so I imagine that was Dan and Dave like realizing that people didn't realize what the Night King was all about. So like, all right, go talk to Entertainment Weekly. We'll give you some stuff to say, and we'll get some information out there for the fans to know.
Yeah, I think there was a degree of expectations management about what backstory we're going to get. Because I know I and many others have been hoping that we're going to be getting huge amounts more extra backstory, understand what their motivations are and all of that. And I think that was just actually, no, you know what? He's just death. That's what Dan and Dave say again and again. So we shouldn't be trying to read too much. Very different in the books, but on the show, we shouldn't try and read too much into who the Night King was originally. Val Law, though, as we're on the theme, says Night King equals the first Lord Commander, and the White Walkers equals the first Night's Watch. Any thoughts on that one, Matt? Of
Um,
course you have.
I always have thoughts. I always have thoughts, Robert. No, like you said, the chronology doesn't really work that well. How could they be the first White Walkers? Were they fighting themselves? Then what if they were also evil? Then why would the Night's Watch continue? You'd probably think they would just get rid of the organization. So yeah, kind of doesn't work
Yeah.
logically.
I would agree with that one. Somebody in the chat I spotted as it was just flicking through was saying, "Don't forget about Westworld." Yeah, don't worry. I will definitely be doing Westworld season 3 as well next year. I think it's probably going to be around this time next year that's coming. They've started filming already, so I imagine it'll probably be a bit less than a year before we see it on our screens. And I will definitely be doing Westworld again as well. There was another question I was going to quickly flick back to. Brian Price saying, sorry to go back to this. The idea of Jaime killing the Night King makes such poetic sense. Kingslayer is literally said every time he has a scene, and Joffrey made fun of how few achievements he has. Yeah, I do agree. It does make a lot of poetic sense. I think that for me, though, it's the theme that they're trying to get there is Oathbreaker as much as Kingslayer, and that seems to be what they've been playing up this season, is the idea of him being an oathbreaker. And then last season, the amount of times the word honor was used when Jaime was around was astonishing. Being a man of honor, he was saying he would be honored to serve under Brienne. They kept on using this word, so it was as if it was saying you might previously been seen as an oathbreaker, but now you are an honorable man. You are the only person out of all of the Lannister army who actually stuck by their word and came up north. So that's the feelings there. And incidentally, that's one of the things that makes me worry a bit about Jaime for this episode, because he had a lot of emotional closure in that last episode, and that's often a hint that perhaps that person's story has come to an end. He had some emotional closure with Brienne. He had long chats with Tyrion about the people that they used to be and how they're much better people these days. And he had closure with Bran about pushing him out of the window. So there was a lot of stuff there that you go, oh, okay, so that bit of his story arc has ended. So that's why I'm a little bit worried about him.
Yeah, it's a tough situation for him, especially because there's so many characters that it looks like are being foreshadowed as like maybe being the ones to kill the Night King, where like the speech that Ned gave to Bran early on, where it's like the man that passes the sentence should swing the sword and you should hear him out, or I forgot the exact line. I said this just yesterday for my video, but I already forgot the line. But John's also looking that way. Dany also has some Zora High princess that was promised things going on, where it's like everyone, all these characters. It's kind of like the Azor High theories that have been going around for a long time, where you can make cases for anybody. A lot of them have really good cases for why they will be the ones to take down the Night King, and that's probably intentional. It just keeps us guessing.
Yeah, I think so. Jeff Burst, long-time patron. Hi, Jeff. Good to see you. Could you speak a bit about Bran equals the Forge and the Night King equals Dolores? So this is a crossover between Game of Thrones and Westworld, or a comparison between the two. Pretty similar plot lines, in my opinion. And thanks for all you do. Yeah, I'll have a very briefly. I'm aware not everyone has watched Westworld. So Westworld season 2. There's no real spoiler here, I think, other than what we've already said in the question. One of the ideas is that what about destroying the memories, the backups of the hosts, and is that similar to this idea of the Night King who's trying to destroy the memories of the world? And I agree, yes, that there's very much a thematic link there between these two things. What I would say is there's a difference between the two, is that the Night King, as they are portraying him on the show, the Night King seems to be more about just destroying everything, all life everywhere, whereas Dolores seems to be about creating a new world in which, and freeing up her people. That seems to be her objective. So whereas the outcome they might be seeking would be similar, the motivation behind that, I suspect, would be different. But it'll be interesting to see where they go. First of all, whether they confirm that that is indeed what the Night King is after here, and where they go with that in the future on Westworld season 3. So thanks for the question on that one. The Disputed Lands. Hi, Amanda. Is here. For those who don't know, she's got a fantastic channel. Greyfried's daughter. I've had her on a couple of times, and I think I've finally persuaded her to come back on for another time to talk about House Greyjoy at some point once the season's over. Saying, hi guys, love to hear your speculation on the identity of the original OG Three-Eyed Raven and Jojo's Twitter thoughts on Bran welcoming the Night King home. Well, I'm going to throw this one over to Matt, but I'll give it a little bit of context here. So Jojo Lady Dane, one of my excellent moderators, had a fantastic thought over on Twitter related to the trailer, where we hear, and this was, I think it was the pre-season trailer, we hear Bran saying something along the lines of everything you've done, everything you've been, that has happened to you has been leading you back here home. And I have speculated, possibly at the time, I thought maybe that was about Jon. I speculated, having seen the trailer for episode 3, that it might be about Theon, because Theon's going to be guarding Bran, so that would make sense if they're having a little chat while they're there. Jojo Lady Dane came up with the idea that perhaps this was Bran talking to the Night King. Everything you have done is to bring you back here home. So I'm going to throw this one over to Matt for his instant reaction. And so that's half of it, and the other half is about who the original Three-Eyed Raven might have been. But which bit of that do you want to pick up on?
I'll go with the first part. So that it makes sense the way she explained that would be a really cool twist if he actually tries to talk to the Night King, because Bloodraven didn't even try when he showed up at the cave. He essentially was off in the dream world and got killed instantly. So nobody's actually ever tried to talk to him at this point. So that would be an interesting twist, much in the way with Ned telling Bran that if you're going to kill somebody, you owe it to hear their last words. That would be interesting. A thing that happens with these trailers, though, is, like I said earlier, they enjoy messing with the fandom. So they will cut things in weird ways to make them imply things that they don't. Like during one of the initial trailers when we saw the dragons flying, they actually CGI'd out Dany and Jon, so you wouldn't know it was going to happen. So you can't always take those with 100% certainty, although I like Jojo Lady Dane's idea about it.
Yeah, I think I'm still sticking with the idea that he's talking to Theon for the reasoning that Theon probably needs to have that conversation with Bran about that. Oh yes, so I chucked you out of your own castle, imprisoned you, pretended to kill you. He will get probably some closure in the same way that Jaime did in talking to Bran about the things that he did to him. So I think they will have a conversation. Any conversation with the Night King is going to be very one-sided because the Night King's not going to be saying anything back. So it's I think it's more likely to me that this is about Theon talking to Theon than the Night King. But I love the idea that this is Bran taking the big picture and welcoming back the Night King to his home.
And then for the Three-Eyed Crow thing, the original Three-Eyed Crow, I really don't like the name Three-Eyed Crow. It's a book quibble that I don't really like, that has become a theory where that's not their name. That's the name that basically Bran made up because he needed something to describe him as. But if you're talking about,
it's a description of his avatar.
Yeah, that's all it is. But they just made it his name in the show, much like they changed the others to the White Walkers, so you can identify him. And they didn't want to get into Bloodraven's past. Okay, so past that, what is the original person that was in that role? There's a lot of speculation out there that maybe this goes back to like the Great Empire of the Dawn. Maybe this is the Pearl Emperor in his what is it, his Pearl Palanquin or whatever, which kind of seems like a weirwood in a way because they're both bone white. I don't know. Other ideas like maybe it's Azor Ahai, maybe it's like my favorite one is that maybe it's Bran the Builder, because there was a pact at some point between the children and the humans, and what do you seal a pact with? Well, a marriage. And then at one point in the books, Bloodraven tells Bran that he's being married to the trees when he drinks what is assuredly Jojen at this point, the Jojen paste. So I would like the idea if the original human in the weirwood net was Bran the Builder, or some character around those times in the Age of Heroes at the end of the Long Night, who agreed to become like the steward of the weirwoods and to be like the jailer of the dam sort of figure. And they were installed in that way in some kind of marriage like Bran went through.
Yeah, and I think this is a weird one because it's the lore in the show and the books is slightly muddled up here. So the way they seem to be presenting it in the on the show is that yes, there's this sort of line of people having this post of the three-eyed raven, that there was Bran, before Bran there was Bloodraven, before him there was someone else, and that's going back a long period in time. Uh, in the books, it doesn't seem to be quite that clear cut. It seems to be that, as we said, this is the Three-Eyed Crow is not a job title. This is simply a description of what Bran saw in his dreams, a crow with three eyes. And so he's like looking for a three-eyed crow, and that's where that comes from. And and Bloodraven doesn't actually immediately recognize that that's who he is. He just sort of he figures out, oh, yes, of course, that makes sense that I'm the three-eyed crow. So in the books, it seems to be that actually this kind of greenseer thing being hooked up to the weirwood network, the children of the forest have had that for centuries, millennia going back beforehand. In the books, you see Bran through Hodor sees lots of children of the forest in the caves underneath, in Bloodraven's caves, hooked up to the weirwood network in various states of decay, suggesting that they've been there lots of different periods of time, and the implication is that that's what's going to happen to Bloodraven over time. He's just going to sink more and more into the tree and just become there. So it's not like there's a one line of three-eyed crows in the books. It's like there's lots of them, and in various states of being sucked up within the weirwood network.
So, in the books, there's the other greenseers that are in the cave with them, the actual children of the forest that are just sitting there, and the skulls that are in these weird little crevices in the cave that have weird roots going through them, kind of like Bloodraven, which kind of leads to the idea that these people are not gone. It's just their forms have basically evaporated.
Yeah, exactly. Scripts to clips for series and flicks. Just saw Avengers Endgame. Now waiting to see Game of Thrones Endgame. Oh yeah, I'm not going to read out that. There's a minor spoiler there, which I won't read out. What do you think is Podrick's chances to survive the evening? I've actually incidentally done exactly the same thing. I watched Avengers Endgame earlier today, and obviously I'm then going to be going on to see episode 3. It's a heavy day for me. In terms of Podrick's chances to survive the evening, I would give them less than 50%. He's one of those people who he's not really got a huge character arc other than supporting Brienne and perhaps showing his ability that he's learned and he can be a really good fighter. He had obviously the moment with the singing last episode, which was like a chance to shine. And also it was sort of in the background, but he showed he was fighting somebody, just doing practice fighting in front of Jaime and Brienne, and he clearly was winning. So they were kind of showing that he's stepped ahead from being this like bumbling fool. He is now an effective warrior. So he is going to be fighting. He's going to be on the front line. I think that there's a fair to reasonable chance he may well die, and it could well be tragic. What do you think about Podrick?
Oh, this is a tough one. Because it would really hurt if Podrick died along with a lot of these characters. But I've sort of mentally prepared myself for a while now that just about everybody's going to die this season, that there will be very few characters left. I mean, that's sort of the point. They are a wave of death washing over Winterfell. I'm pretty sure, no spoilers or anything, I haven't seen any spoilers or leaks or anything, but like just the setup, it seems like many, many, many characters are going to die, including Podrick. I usually do a little math problem in my head when I'm trying to figure out if a character is going to die in a sequence, where it's how much would it hurt the audience to do, and then how much do they have left to do as a character. So Podrick's sort of fully formed at this point, He didn't really get much lines, but it would really, really hurt the fan base if he died. So I give that a high rating. It was like Thoros last season, where going into that thing where they were going on the White Heist, and it was just like, he doesn't have a lot left to do, but he's a beloved character. Yeah, it makes sense. He'll probably be the one to go. It's tough. There was also a comment from the actor Daniel, is it Portman? I think that's his name.
Portman, yeah.
Where after he got all these compliments about his singing, and he sort of talked about his time on Game of Thrones in like the past tense.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's gonna go do singing and stuff like that on like X Factor or something. And it was like a lot of the other actors are still talking about their characters like they're still alive. And I was like, no. All right, well, I guess Podrick's kind of doomed.
Yeah, I mean, he's dispensable is probably the wrong word, but it's almost like an easy emotional hit for us if you can kill Podrick, and there's nothing left for him to do. At some point, he will die, and you might as well do it in the most emotionally impactful way. John Dawson says, might the Red Woman bring dragons from Essos? So there's two parts to this, I think. Is Melisandre returning in time for this battle? Will she bring dragons from Essos? I'm going to go out and say she's not bringing dragons. They don't have, in the bits of Essos we know, they still do not have other dragons. There's the area off beyond Ashai, rumors of dragons. But in the bits that we know, the Dothraki Sea, the Free Cities, and so on, they don't have dragons. So there are no dragons for her to bring. Is she coming back, though? I will throw to you, Matt. What do you think? She's definitely coming back. This is almost certain.
Yeah.
Her storyline is tied up with the fight against the Night King rather than who wins the Iron Throne. This is also certain. Do you think this means that she's going to be back in time for this episode? And if so, what's she going to be bringing with her?
Weird. You don't think she's back already? You don't think she's the little girl that was like the Shireen, analog?
I hope not.
I heard that theory. I thought it was interesting. It would be funny if she like went back to see Davos as like sorry I killed her kind of thing. But in terms of like what she'll actually, well, she seems kind of sorry now. Well, we've got 3 armies unaccounted for, basically. We've got the Golden Company and the Lannister forces, whatever they're doing. We've got Melisandre and the Fiery Hand. I don't even know how they're getting to Westeros if they are. I mean, I guess just boats out of Atlantis. Okay, fine. But then there's also the Wolf Army, Nymeria's Wolf Army, which is out there somewhere. I imagine if they're going for a Helm's Deep kind of thing, or like the Battle of Pelennor Fields kind of thing, that Melisandre will take the role of the Rohirrim with the Fiery Hand, because it doesn't seem like the Golden Company are going to do that. Although, this was something I was actually wondering on Twitter. Robert, do you think the Golden Company knows about the Night King and the Army of the Dead? Do you think Cersei has told them that's what's happening?
Possibly not yet, but what I would say is that I see absolutely no motivation whatsoever for Cersei to send the Golden Company all the way up to Winterfell.
Yeah. Well, just to kick them in the back, I guess, if there's anything left.
Sorry, to carry on. I have thoughts on this, but carry on.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I was wondering, like, if they actually know what they're going up against, like, they can't be so greedy. And a lot of them are Westerosi. They won't want to see like the entire continent wiped out by the White Walkers. So I think the only way it makes sense that she hired them to go up north to fight, or maybe not go up north, maybe meet them at the Trident, maybe something like that, to make sure she's the winner in the end, that they're just going to be like, oh yeah, cool, there's an army of the dead sweeping across like a genocide across Westeros. That's a hard ask for a bunch of sellswords. At some point, humanity kicks over, right? You'd hope, like Jaime?
Well, yeah. And so my thought here is that the Golden Company and Cersei, in terms of her motivations, her actual plan that she stated seems to make a little bit of sense for one of her plans. It certainly does. That why on earth would you try and fight both armies that are attacking if they're just going to be killing each other? That makes no sense at all. It's much better for her to actually just dig in somewhere down south and see which army survives. Otherwise, you're fighting 2 armies at the same time. It just makes no sense. So I don't see any reason for them to be up there. Nymeria and the Wolf Pack, I think in the books they're definitely going to have a role to play. I think I fear this might just be budgetary reasons whether or not they appear this time on the show. In terms of the Fiery Hand, I have a feeling they've not bigged up the Fiery Hand enough on the show for it to have emotional resonance when they arrive. It'll be a sort of a matter of, oh, who are they to most people who are watching. Whereas the Rohirrim that you were talking about, we knew that they're big and important and impressive. We'd seen them already. This was a big thing, and so it wasn't a surprise to have them appear. That doesn't mean that the Fiery Hand won't appear. One thing which is noticeable in the trailer is there is a lot of fire everywhere. So the living will certainly be firing things off that are fiery, obviously, but is there anything else that is bringing fire? I still have the sneaky feeling that Melisandre wants to give a fiery sword to Jon. Whether he wants to have it or not is another matter, but I think that that's where we first saw her producing a fiery sword for what she said was the prince that was promised, and now she thinks Jon is the prince that was promised. So if she's true to her character and her beliefs, she should be giving that to him.
Did you hear the thing about how Beric's sword no longer requires blood? That he just does it with a Valyrian spell now, apparently?
I did, yeah.
So I guess you just say some words like Harry Potter and your sword lights up.
it's yes, Lumos. Let's quickly go back. Lost for Words, thank you so much. First IDG video to hit 1 million views. Yeah, this obviously happened while we're live. My Tyrion video querying why Tyrion has been so stupid recently, that it was a surprising runaway success, and obviously just hit 1 million views, so thank you very much. That was, incidentally, I put to my patrons a couple of ideas for which video I should do, and that was the one that they chose. So clearly my patrons are very clever people. So patrons, thank you. I shall definitely be asking you again, probably next week, what video to do, as you've clearly got the magic touch. Zenon Faye, thank you for the super chat. Agnieszka Janika Struska, apologies for butchering your name, but from Poland with love, keep up the good work. Thank you so much. Colleen Vanderpass, love the stream. Thank you. As we started on this one, Senorf999 says, do you think the young girl in the Davos scene in the last episode was a young Melisandre using a glamour? What do you reckon? We sort of talked about it, but do you think it is?
No. There was after the episode, Dan and Dave talked about that, and they basically said it was like just a character moment for Davos, that it wasn't really some sort of weird hint. There's also no rubies anywhere, although they kind of let that go for a part of the time for Melisandre, but the last time we saw her, the ruby thing appeared to matter. So if she's got one, it's tucked down deep in a pocket, I guess.
Yeah, so I think my take is that it's possible, but it would mean Melisandre's got a streak of sadism about Davos that perhaps I don't think she has. She seems to be many things, but actually trying to torture a person simply because they were nasty to her doesn't seem to be her style. I would agree that the child does resemble Shireen, and I think it will serve two purposes. That firstly, it gives Davos this chance to save her in some way, to allow him some kind of emotional satisfaction about that little bit of his arc. And secondly, I did have a secondly.
Did you? Was there a secondly?
There was a secondly, and it was going to be a really good point. But anyway, I will come back to that. There was definitely another reason why I thought she was there, looking like Shireen. Oh, yes, to remind us about what Melisandre did. Now, this is something they did last episode also with Arya and Gendry, was they had, when they were having, or in their flirty time, shall we call it, then there was a whole lots of dropping, and what about the Red Woman, and what did she do, and when she kidnapped you, and all the rest of it. They were making sure that we were aware of all the things that she'd done before. This, again, I think is another way that showrunners are showing us bad things that Melisandre has done before, so that when she arrives, we'll have them in our memory, and we're not just thinking, here's somebody else who can help with the battle. So I think that's the second point, that a reason why they did that.
I think that's a really good point, that when she shows up, she has a history of trying to burn kids and give them over for magical purposes, and just being like, any sacrifice is worth survival. So if she shows up, I imagine she'll be in that role, probably talking to Jon, because I don't know if this is true, but I've thought for a while that we're going to find out, maybe this episode, maybe the next one, that Dany's pregnant, and that will come up somehow. Like, it would, I don't know. It seems weird to have two characters have a really good sex scene and have them be like secret princes and a mixing of ice and fire, and then have that really go nowhere.
Well, the more telling point there, I think, was the way that they very heavy-handedly had this Jon querying whether she really should believe the person who said she could have no children.
Yeah, that too.
And Tyrion saying, "Well, what about the succession if you're not having children?" Da 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 da. And her saying a couple of times, "The dragons are my children," and things like that. They went very heavy on it for a couple of episodes. The idea that she thought she wasn't going to have any children, so that leaves the idea that perhaps she might have children. But we've got 4 episodes left. This next episode seems to be happening in a sort of a 24-hour period. So really, we've only got 3 episodes left after this. If that doesn't leave much time for a confirmation of pregnancy, full-term pregnancy and birth, I'm just going to leave it out there.
Oh, I don't think full-term pregnancy. I think it may be like a Nissa situation.
Oh, don't. I'm not going to go there. That would be too horrible. Mr. Skillen, do you think Sansa will die now that we like her? Oh, maybe third bad marriage for her as the Night Queen. Personally, no, I think that Sansa will survive. That's just my gut instinct. I think that she is going to end as the Lady of Winterfell. I think that her full story arc leads up to her being safe and in control of her own destiny, and that hasn't yet fully happened. So I think that's where she needs to and be content at Winterfell in a way that she definitely wasn't at the start. But what do you think? Do you think she's a goner, or is she going to survive?
I think she's going to survive for the reasons you said, but also just because there are 3 people in Winterfell that have sworn basically to protect her, sort of. You got Jaime and Brienne, and then kind of Sandor, a little bit more on Arya's side, but even still, he cares about Sansa a lot. So I imagine, as things go very badly in Winterfell this episode, that Sansa's going to get a lot of get down Mr. President moments as characters dive in front of whites coming for her or something like that. I imagine at the end of the episode, we're probably going to get a retreat south, and there will be a lot of characters sort of doing a last stand thing to make sure the survivors get away. Sansa will probably be one of them.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance. If there is that kind of retreat south, she will be one of the people who will be leading it. It would be quite a Battlestar Galactica feel to it. I think this kind of ragtag fleet.
Does that make her? What's her name? What's the president's name?
Oh, I can't remember now.
Lori something. Okay, I gotta look at this up.
I don't know. The only character's name I remember there is Gaius, simply because of one of the best worst episode titles ever. No more Mr. Nice Gaius. Anyway, G. Joe says, in the last episode, Jaime mentioned the Battle of the Whispering Wood. He did. Should we expect a trap from the Night King? You're the best, Robert. Cheers from France. Thank you very much. Now, you talked about the Battle of the Whispering Wood in your video recently.
Yes.
So do you want to answer this, and on the back of that, give a little plug to your video?
Sure. So the video itself is called End of Jon's Song, Killing of a Ranger Part 2. It's the sequel to my one where I talked about how Waymar and Jon are very much linked, and the White Walkers killed Waymar because they thought he was Jon, or some sort of variation of that. And the Battle Whispering Wood has come up a lot, and it's really heavily foreshadowed that this will be something that's going to come up, because in the Battle of Whispering Wood, Robb Stark captures a scout from Tywin Lannister, lets him count all the men, and then sends it back to Tywin with the message that Robb is going to meet him with his full force. Robb does the opposite. He sends 2,000 men to die at, I think, at the Battle of the Green Fork. I think that's what it is. And then he goes and finds Jaime that's sieging River Run, takes them from behind, knocks out their forces, scatters it, takes Jaime hostage. Jaime talked about that as his motivation for why he left Casterly Rock completely undefended in the last season, and why they went to go get Highgarden instead. Just the basic diversionary tactic. But it's something that is really heavily layered in A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones, that these kind of sacrificial diversions are a big part of the way they're constructing the story and the way these battles kind of end up going. What my mind to in particular for my video was that this is actually the plan, more or less, that Aragorn did after the Battle of Pelennor Fields, where they marched on the Black Gate in order to get Sauron to send out his forces so that Frodo could go drop the ring into Mount Doom in order to end Sauron. Now, that's a really simple version of what I think is going to happen, but I think George is extremely heavily influenced by that. And Bran actually basically says that plan, more or less, for what he's going to try and do at the Weirwood, where he says, I've been marked by the Night King, the Night King's coming for me, so I'm going to go over here, so he'll expose himself, so maybe we can defeat him there. But because Bran said it, it's probably not going to work. So I think it's going to come up. I think Bran's plan overall, he hasn't told anybody, is that he expects Winterfell to fall, that this battle was never meant to be a winning one, that Winterfell itself is the Battle of is the Green Fork and the Battle of Whispering Wood, where they're going to defeat the Night King or come to some sort of pact or agreement, is going to come further down the line, maybe at the Trident, maybe somewhere else. That it's kind of like they picked this up for Avengers with Doctor Strange in the first one, no spoilers, where he said that his thing where he said he looked into the future and saw there was like 13 million possibilities, the only one once, and it was where they had to give Thanos the gems, in order for the sequent events to happen so that the Thanos is defeated at some point. I think that's basically what's happening here with the Night King.
If Thanos is defeated.
If Thanos is defeated, but I mean, it's a comic book movie, the bad guy is going to die. But yeah, I think that's essentially what's happening here. It's a large-scale Whispering Wood. It's a large-scale Casterly Rock and Highgarden. Bran is going to intentionally lose this battle and maybe let himself be killed so that somewhere further down the line in the season, they're able to find a way to stop the Night King, whatever that actually means. Whew.
Yeah. So it's a great video. I watched it actually before we went live. I would highly recommend you do watch both parts of it, actually. So as always with Matt's videos, I agree with huge amounts of it. Some of it I don't agree with, but I like the logic. And I think that I would tie this into, it was either a video, I didn't watch it, it might have been a podcast actually from Radio Westeros, but the title I really loved, which was Jon Snow, a hero without a hero's moment. And I, as I say, I've not watched it or listened to it, but the logic makes sense. Is that we've got Jon Snow, who every time he seems to almost back out. So he ran away from Hardhome, effectively. Then he has a few moments north of the wall, but never really does a thing. When he goes up to he sort of the battle beyond the wall, he does a few bits of saving of the people so that they could get onto the dragon in a kind of self-sacrificial way, but it's not really heroic. It's not like the great heroic gesture. The thing he did at the Battle of the Bastards, going out and grabbing Rickon a little bit too late, that was stupid, really, rather than heroic. So he's not yet had this moment where you could point out and say that is his hero's moment. It's possible he will never have one, but are we actually saying that his hero's moment is still to come with him facing the Night King? Because this is where traditionally we would expect using the kind of the hero's journey kind of idea about this traditional hero that Jon is shaped up to be. That's where the story should take us, is him having this face-off against the Night King at some point. I think George R. R. Martin is going to try and subvert that a little bit, but on the show, it's entirely possible that he is going to have some sort of heroes moments there.
I totally agree. And the comparison I made is that Waymar Royce in the prologue dies surrounded by White Walkers and others, and he doesn't really know what he's walking into. The twist, I think, for Jon is that he's going to be told that he has to do this, or he's going to walk into that same scenario, but he's going to do it knowingly. And it's going to be, Waymar is a tragedy the way he died, but Jon's will probably be a tragedy for a very different reason, because he will know what he's giving up, like the speech that Maester Aemon gave him about like love being the death of duty, what is honor and doing what's right versus the having the sun in your arms. Talking about the pregnancy again. I also tend to think that when you look at what happened in Lord of the Rings with Aragorn, which is the main comparison I made, Aragorn's sacrifice is really a fake sacrifice because nothing happens. Like, they get surrounded, a few random dudes die around him, but he's still fine. He still goes on to be the king of Gondor and to be one of the greatest kings of all time. His sacrifice was really just kind of subverted by convenient ring going into volcano. I imagine for the show and George, if they're doing the same thing, which I think they will, that the consequences for Jon will not be avoided at the last second, which seems to be a very George thing to do.
Yeah. I think so. So he's certainly, if he has a hero's moment, that doesn't mean to say that he's going to have the hero's reward at the end of it.
Yeah, no reward.
I think that's if we know anything about Jon's character, then he will probably end up, if he's still alive at the end of it all, then he's going to be brooding over something or other. He's not going to be there sitting very happy about what's going on in the world. Bruce Savage, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, we have not seen combat between mounted living and whites or White Walkers on foot. Do you think the Dothraki are going to be able to wreck whites during the battle? Why are the Knights of the Vale dismounted? Well, to pick up on the Knights of the Vale, yeah, we did see some of them on foot. That doesn't mean that they're all on foot. So I imagine we may well see some of the Knights of the Vale again. The Dothraki, yes, I think that this is probably one of the first things that we're going to be seeing in the battle. The Dothraki, I certainly imagine that they will, I can't remember what they call it, the cuirass or whatever it is, the curved, the curved swords. They're going to be tipped with dragon glass or something along those lines, I'm sure. And they're going to go charging into the whites. I think that we'll see them do otherwise, what's the point of them? A horse is not a defensive weapon. You use them offensively to go and attack people at sort of at speed. So yes, I'm pretty sure we're going to see that happen. It won't actually make much of a difference at the end of the day, though, because the whole point about how this works is that if they take down 2 or 3 of them, then they just get raised up. So then it's 2 off of one side and 2 onto the other. So the balance is always going to be shifting. No matter how many whites get knocked down, it's always going to be shifting over to the dead.
I wanted to point out that my friend and fellow moderator, Brendan Beefish of the Nauticast podcast, put out a really good post on Reddit where he breaks down the battle, because he's actually in the army and he's a military historian. So he took the overview of what we saw before the battle and what the troops can do in numbers and tried to give a reasonable prediction of how the battle will go. It's really cool. I'm gonna try and find the link and drop it in the chat.
Excellent. Yeah, please do. I think that Geek Chat 1 JR from there has done a similar thing as well, if you want to go and check that one out too. Arlene Jasmine saying the Valonqar prophecy describes Cersei as having a pale white throat. Is it possible that she is brought back as a white and that's when the prophecy comes true? Yeah, very much. However, we have to keep on remembering the Valonqar prophecy is not on the show. They have not given us that. When they did that flashback to Maggie the Frog's prophecy on the show, they cut it off before there. So they've deliberately kept that bit out. So we're not expected, as watchers of the show, we're not expected to be looking for a Valonqar. That doesn't mean that that she's not going to be killed by somebody who would perhaps fit under that description, but that isn't one of the kind of the thematic beats that they've been using for this. The pale white throat is a phrase that's always grabbed me, and I certainly like this idea that she might at some point in the books and possibly also on the show be raised again as a white. We know that she's got as her right hand man someone who does that now. The Mountain, say it again and again, is a prototype. He didn't just try and create one and then say, right, that's it, I'm done. That is his first effort at how you create his kind of science whites. And once he's got the one, and he's also now got that hand, if you remember back last season in the Dragon Pit, he picked up the hand of the white and stared at it quizzically. That was clearly showing us that he's still thinking about how to improve what he's doing. So I think that, yes, there's a very good chance we're going to have a lot more of these whites, Qyburn created whites in King's Landing. And Cersei could well, there's more than one hint in the books that that might be where she's heading up. What do you think about white Cersei?
I've heard this theory that as part of the Night King going south, he's going to raise Cersei as his queen, or maybe she'll become the new Night King. It's an interesting idea. One thing that makes me think that Qyburn's probably not manufacturing more whites is that he seemed very disturbed when Cersei essentially, when he told her in episode 1, hey, the White Walkers have broken through the wall, they're coming south, and she goes, no problem. And he goes like, no, that's a big problem. You can see it on his face. And then when he's talking to Bran later, he's trying to convince Bran to go do what Cersei wants, but he's more like convincing himself, where he's like, look, Cersei's great, she's done really great by me. It's like, all right, bro. I mean, all right, Qyburn. I guess we believe you that you think this is great. I wonder what he really thinks about Robert Strong. And if Robert Strong can be controlled, because we know that Benjen, he was able to resist their control because he has that dragon glass in his chest. Do we think that Robert Strong has dragon glass in his chest, or is he available to be taken?
No, so my take is that well, I call them science whites. This is Qyburn has understood how to keep hold of that part of the echo of the human spirit or soul or whatever it is that remains that he talks about so wonderfully when he's talking to Jaime in the books. He's figured out how to keep hold of that, so he doesn't need to have dragon glass to create a white walk. He's creating the whites. Noah Kelvert saying, will Mel bring the fiery hand? We talked about this a little bit earlier. I think our answer is it's possible. She is, I think, definitely coming back. Whether she brings the fiery hand with her, I would personally have liked them to tell us a bit more about the fiery hand on the show first, for that to be the case. I think they get a whole lot more attention within the community than the mentions that they get in either the books or the show. Guy Smulders saying, loving the conversation so far. Do you think the survivors of the battle are forced to retreat deeper into the crypts and discover something there? Pardon me. I think it's entirely possible. They've name-checked a couple of times previously the idea that there are tunnels out of the crypts. I think it's entirely possible that that is their way out of this, is that they get pushed deeper and deeper in there, and then they have to escape out that way. So I don't think that they're going to discover a thing there that is like, oh, this is the secret to what's really been going on. They haven't really built that up on the show at all. That's just that they seem to be using the crypts as just a sort of a place that's very Starkish, rather than specifically the home of where the Starks are laid, and this is where their spirits still are. In the books, the spirits are very much still there and very much still restless, and so there's a very ethereal and haunting aspect to it that doesn't come across really on the show. Nobody seems to be that spooked by being down there. But what do you think, Matt? Do you think they're going to find anything in the crypts?
I really love the crypts as a concept. I've written about them a couple times, done a few live streams about them. One of the things that's really strange about them is the Starks really are never afraid of them. They use those essentially as where they would play as little kids. Like, they wouldn't play in the Great Hall. Not really the gods would. For some reason, they would just go down to the crypts to play. Very strange, very morbid. Kind of tells you that the Starks are very cool with undeath and death as a concept. There's also the story that Jace Valarion's dragon somehow laid eggs in the crypts. He's not going down those stairs, so if that actually happened, and probably didn't, then there probably is some sort of cavern or way into it, since it appears to be it appears to be that it was sort of built on top of a Child of the Forest cavern system, and they go very, very deep. So maybe there's like a Gendel and Gordon situation happening. The two brothers that tried to sneak under the wall through Children of the Forest caves ended up lost and essentially became cave people. That could be kind of sad. I tend to think the escape from Winterfell will be the Dothraki and the Vale Knights will just grab anyone who's still alive, get on a horse and ride, because they've established that the whites in the show are more the walking dead than the running dead. You can sort of just outpace them on a horse. Jon did that last season. It's happened. Mira and Bran on a sled escaped them somehow. So apparently out of sight of the whites, you're safe. So that's I tend to think how it will happen.
And as we saw from the battle layout beforehand, the army of the dead are only attacking from one side. So you've got the other side of Winterfell to escape from.
Oh, the other side.
Yes, I know. Nobody seems to be worrying about that side. The Val Law says Mad King and Joanna Lannister equals Cersei and Jaime, and Tyrion is the one true Lannister. Thoughts? Yeah, so this is... I have many thoughts on this. I think that is possible. But so for those who don't know, Joanna Lannister, Tywin's wife, it's very clear that the Mad King certainly lusted after her and may well have gone even further than that and acted on it in some way. So Cersei and Jaime have some of these Targaryen traits, like the incest thing, for example. And Cersei has a lot of kind of links across to the Mad King, her being the Mad Queen. So there is a hint of that possibility. But in the books, certainly Tyrion, there are a lot more hints that he has a Targaryen-ishness about him. He gets dragon dreams. He's fascinated by them. When he goes down, I was looking at this recently, he goes down into the Red Keep underneath, and he finds the old dragon skulls, and they seem to almost like him. He seems very happy with them in a way that they are the language used when Arya goes down there is that they're snapping at her, trying to get at her. So if anything, I think Tyrion is rather than the other two, but I do like the idea. But talking of the dragons, Thomas Bingham wants to know whether the dragons will survive season 8, if not eggs for hope. What do you think? I mentioned this briefly in terms of the White Walkers, that perhaps we might see this idea of White Walkers might go, but there's some more hidden away somewhere else. Do you think that might be the case with the dragons?
I think there's definitely a chance that there will be dragon eggs from maybe Drogon and Rhaegal. Maybe they'll find them somewhere else. It's one of those weird things where the show and the books are really focused on Westeros, but there literally is an entire other planet out there. And there's rumors that there's dragons beyond Ashai and these caverns and all these other crazy places, just that nobody in Westeros can go see them. It kind of depends on what kind of ending you think they're going for. Like, I talked earlier about the deep connections between A Song of Ice and Fire and Lord of the Rings, and there are quite a lot. A main problem in Lord of the Rings is that it's the death of magic idea, where magic is going out of the world. That's how Sauron tricked everybody into taking the rings of power. They essentially maintain magic, but at the end of the story, the elves are moving on to the out of the world, and the magic's just going with them. So if you think they're going for that, then there's good reason to think there will be no more dragons, because that's the end of Lord of the Rings is the start of our civilization, essentially, in a very fantasy-ish way. I don't think they're going to go directly for that, because George really likes writing in terms of cycles. Like, history keeps repeating itself. The same characters keep coming up. Like, Robert Baratheon is Aegon the Fourth, and the Great Bastards are just keep popping up, and all these characters have these direct parallels, which sort of tells you that this is not new. It's been happening for forever. So by George's example, I would expect there will probably be dragon eggs, or the others won't be, or the White Walkers won't be completely gone. But if they go for a full Lord of the Rings ending, then they probably will. I guess that's my take.
Yeah, and my take is that this is about balance, and it's a Song of Ice and Fire, and Ice and Fire are two opposing forces, both of which could destroy the world, and we're not going to end up with one of them defeating the other. We're going to end up with some sort of balance, both of them pushed back in some way. I don't see any of the dragons surviving on Westeros after the end of this season. Similarly, I don't see the White Walkers surviving in Westeros or south of the Wall, certainly after the season. So, possibility of showing some eggs somewhere. Well, there are dragon eggs somewhere in the world. That's just the way that it is. Whether they wish to highlight that fact or not, I think is up for the showrunners.
Unfortunately, the last time I saw that was in the Godzilla movie with Matthew Broderick, and that was a terrible movie. So I don't know if they're going to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are ways of doing it that's quite cool, and there are ways of doing it that's quite naff. Brandon Richter, thank you very much for your super chats. Jamie McKenna says, "Hey guys, thoughts on what would happen if Dany lost her whole army and her dragons tonight? Impact on the last 3 episodes." Also, Hot Pie was right. Winter Hell. Well, yeah, Hot Pie's right about everything. If anyone's going to win this one, it's Hot Pie. Who, let's face it, actually, complete digression on Hot Pie. We often joke about Hot Pie. Hot Pie is the only character who has now based himself at the center. He's at the inn of the crossroads. That is the center of Westeros, effectively. That is when we're talking about the Isle of Faces, Harrenhal, the rest. He's the person who's right there in that area. He definitely... no, he's not. I'm talking rubbish. Hot Pie is just a minor character. But what would happen if Dany lost her whole army and her dragons tonight? Will she, Matt? And if she does, what would happen?
I think just because we don't know many of the people in her army, that we really just know Grey Worm, and I forget the guy. I even forget the Dothraki leader's name. Do you know his name?
I can't remember, though. They told us like once.
Yeah, the Northern army has a lot more faces to it, so that would probably tell you that probably a lot more of them survive. I am very worried that Dany's army is going to get a Star Trek reference, that they're going to get red-shirted out of this battle. But it would be an interesting twist, because a lot of Dany's authority at this point is based on, well, that she's a good ruler and she's a charismatic ruler, but also that she has 2 dragons and huge armies. So what would happen then? Well, I imagine the Northerners might turn on her, might push Jon to the forefront, but I think that would only make the turmoil between them in terms of succession. And it's like the classic idea of, what is it? Bigger army diplomacy. That usually ends up who ends up on the thrones throughout history. So if Dany no longer has the bigger army and she has the worst claim, would Jon and Sansa still respect that? I imagine Jon will. I don't think the rest of the people would.
No, I think that's right. I can certainly see her losing 1 dragon in this battle, Rhaegal. I think that Drogon will survive, personally. I think I'd agree that most of her army that she brought up is Dothraki and Unsullied. They very noticeably are out in the field, so they are the ones who are most likely to be dying quite quickly, because they're going to be in combat very soon. So yeah, there's a good chance that her army will largely, if not be decimated, then be certainly very diminished. And Jamie points this fact out, incidentally, that Cersei's waiting down there, and her army would be able to defeat anything that emerged from the back that they had. That wasn't just a throwaway comment. That was something they wanted us to know, that Cersei holding back means that she will have a bigger army. That's just something that they want us to be thinking about for the future. So I would agree, Matt, that the crucial thing here is then what happens with the dynamic between Jon and Dany. Dany becomes a whole lot less attractive as a potential monarch if she's not got as many dragons as she used to, and her army is a lot smaller, and therefore we will see some people start to think about whether Jon should be the right person. Joseph Fireborn, thank you, new patron. Great to see you. I was watching last episode with subtitles and realized they gave the little girl who spoke to Davos, this is the Shireen one, the name Tila. I didn't know that. I don't think that's particularly significant, but Matt, in a moment, if you know any reason how that is particularly significant as a name, then please do shout in a second. Because also we had Smurfs who saying, after proof, would Tywin have taken the dead army seriously and prepared or helped? Also, will Bronn turn on Jaime and Tyrion, or is Cersei tricking him? So which of these do you want to pick up on? Tywin, Bronn, or Tila?
Well, I guess the only thing I could think of with the name Tila is that is a very Lannister name. The Ty suffix or prefix comes up a lot, but it's also one that comes from the Free Cities a lot, like Tiana, the Tower, those kind of people. So maybe they're trying to hint that it's Melisandre coming from the east. I guess it's not a northern name, that's for sure. I don't know where that came from, or at least not a common one. They tend to go with well, actually, because it's you, they go with largely British names. Almost all of them are just traditionally British names. The South really has the weird ones for a large part. That's all I got for that. For Tywin, I would hate to see Tywin with this happening, because he is such an awful person at using tragedy to advance himself, that we're really worried that, well, I'm really worried that Cersei's going to somehow sabotage the North, or just like sit there with the Golden Company to kill them as whatever survivors come out of the North. But Tywin would probably be even more savage than that. Like, the Red Wedding's on his name, as is the Reigns of Castamere, which is honestly one of the worst things in the books, what he did to that family, locking in the mine and then flooding it. And then just sort of every time, all his diplomacy from then on was essentially writing to people and being like, hey, you want to be the new House Rain? Awful, awful, awful person. I would hate to see him in this, but he probably would believe it, but only if it served his purposes, I guess.
Yeah, I think what I would say on that one is that I would say Cersei's decision to hold back and let the other people fight each other before taking on whoever wins is actually probably the most Tywin bit of strategy she's done yet. That's exactly the kind of thing that he did. He held back in Robert's Rebellion to see who was going to win, and then he came in and chose the winning side. So that was very much down to him. On the second part of that, about Bronn will Bronn turn on Jaime and Tyrion? My feeling is that probably he will remember the fact that Tyrion promised to double anything that he's paid, and he will go with that. And I think he's going to end up with his castle or castles. I still love this idea
3
that he's going. Well, I love the idea that he's going to be given the twins. I think that works as 2 castles. That works a lot for me, guys. It's we come to the end of the time. I was going to go. Let's go on for another quarter of an hour. I'm going to pick up the pace on the questions, so I'm going to start cutting Matt off when he goes into his heresies.
No, not like LML.
But we'll keep the questions coming, and we will answer them all as best we can. Jackie Miner says, is Bran lying about the Night King's motives? Why does it matter if the three-eyed raven knows everything about the past if he doesn't tell anyone? The second point is incredibly valuable. He doesn't know everything about the past. He has to access it, is the key point here, I think. He didn't know about Rhaegar and Lyanna. He had to go and have a look. He's got the memories that he can access. But what do you think? Is Bran lying about the Night King's motives? Does he know?
I don't think he knows, because how would he? The Night King doesn't speak. He wants to kill them. That may just be like the accumulated knowledge of all these years of three-eyed raven figures just being like, what is he even doing? Like, what does the Night King want at this point? Why is he still trying to kill us? That's what it seems like, because unless there was some kind of mind meld when the Night King marked him, I don't know where he's getting that information from.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We don't know where he gets this from, but I fear this might be all we're told, and I think we just have to go with it. It's just we assume that Bran knows these things. Linda Prasuta, thank you so much. Another very generous super chat. If something kills or cures the Night King, Could it be with coloured dragonglass, crystals, or gemstones? Now, what I would say on this in terms of the Night King is that we've only really been told 2 or 3 possible things here about this. We know how he was created by putting the dragonglass into him, which leads us to wonder whether you could uncreate him by taking it out. And we have the fact that there is a specific weapon that we've been told about, Lightbringer, which the story bizarrely doesn't actually tell us what happened with Lightbringer. It just tells us really about the forging of it, but we're led to believe that this is the weapon that is used. So I think at this stage it has to be something that they've teed up beforehand, not a completely new thing like crystals or gemstones. I think that they have to come up with something that makes sense within the story, particularly if they discover it to this episode. What do you think, Matt? Do you think any of those things might kill him?
I think if he exists in the books, then probably, because, like I said during my Whisper Jewels little spiel, George loves crystals, and he loves using them as magical artifacts and having them being the center point piece of his stories. For the show, it may just be as simple as, like, his body's gone, but the crystal's still there, so maybe they just need Gendry to hit it with a hammer or something like that. Like, I don't think the end of this season will be about the Night King. I think it will be largely a scouring of the Shire scenario where they're picking up the pieces. Like, I honestly expect him to be defeated in the next 2 episodes, and the last 2 are dealing with the aftermath.
Yeah, I agree completely with that feel. If I can persuade people to stop using the word bittersweet to describe the ending and start using like the scouring of the Shire, then I will feel a great sense of satisfaction, because this is what George R.R. Martin has said a number of times. That is the feel he is going for. Jesse Losa says, cheers from the US. Can the Northern Army retreat strategically and burn dead that remain with dragonfire to prevent resurrection? Wife and I love your work. Thank you so much. Well, yes, they could. If they have a dragon, they can certainly use that. Although if the Night King still got a dragon, then they won't have complete air cover. So if they're going to retreat, then it would make sense to burn as many of the dead as they possibly can. David Stave says, YouTube gave me a free super chat. Enjoy. Thank you so much. That's very much
appreciated. They do that? That's a thing?
I did not know that they did that, but that's, well, I'd like to encourage this, YouTube. Well done. Elisa Casasnovas saying, is it possible that Beric Dondarrion could give the kiss of life to the three-eyed raven, which could bring back Bran Stark instead of the raven? Why don't you take this one, Matt?
It's certainly on the table. This is how Lady Stoneheart, or Catelyn Stark, was resurrected in the books. The kiss of fire. I mean, they changed it for the show because I don't think they wanted Thoros just making out with with Beric all the time. They made it less direct, more saying words. But yeah, he totally could. There's been this sort of weird idea for a while that it feels like Beric is like holding the eternal flame, almost like the flame of life within himself. He's going to use it at some point, because his name is interesting. The name Dondarrion is like the name, if you break it down, means messenger of the gods, basically. So I think that's kind of what's going to end up happening. Maybe he'll resurrect somebody, like they were saying. Maybe somebody strategically. Maybe Jon gets another chance. Who knows? Yeah,
Jon's already said he doesn't want to be brought back again. Whether he changes his mind, though, is
well, tough luck on that, Jon. It just kind of happens.
Peace and Serenity says, painting and listening to you while I wait for episode 3. Thank you so much. Leathery Wings, another new patron. Great to see you. Great discussion. Do you think Ghost will survive the battle with the dead? I think Ghost will survive for as long as Jon does, is my best guess. But it does have to be said that Summer didn't last very long when fighting the Whites, if you're looking for a track record of direwolves against Whites. Yeah, I don't have a feeling one way or the other on this one. I have to say, I would like Ghost to survive as long as Jon does, and I think certainly in the books that will be where it goes. I wouldn't be surprised if they give him a great final hurrah. They've not made as big a thing as book readers would have liked with the direwolves, it has to be said. So I think they're just going to use him as a cool part of the army of the living. But what do you think? Is Ghost going to survive?
I do not expect him to survive the series either. Although I imagine they got a lot of feedback after the death of Summer that it was like, oh, that was kind of a waste of that character you spent so long building up. So if Ghost goes, I imagine they have a better plan for him this time than just like going down in a hail of whites. Something more heroic. Maybe as we were talking about how John's missing his heroic moment. Well, since he and Ghost are basically the same, maybe Ghost's example will push John to be heroic.
Yes, it might well be the case. I think it's he's certainly not just going to go out with a whimper, so to speak. Ricardo Guida says, "Wouldn't John be Aegon the Seventh, since his older brother was also Aegon?" Okay, so the question. So this is a matter of where it always gets complicated with the Targaryens. So this is why I'm taking my time. So when Rhaegar died, Aerys was still king. Now, the simple answer, there's a slight complication on this one along the way. The simple answer is that we do not know whether technically Aerys died first or baby Aegon died first. So we don't know whether or not that king died first. That whole bit there is quite muddy and clouded. So we're not 100% sure. But he, at some stage, said that apparently, according to the Maesters in the World of Ice and Fire, said that Viserys was his new heir at some point during that period. So when he died, theoretically, it went over to Viserys. But the fact is that if baby Aegon had been technically king, it would only have been for a matter of minutes. And so they probably wouldn't have counted that in any way. What do you think, Matt? Have you got a better take on this?
No, that kind of makes sense, where it's just like he wasn't crowned, so he didn't really get the name. Although there's one thing that George has ignored largely that's a real thing in monarchs and kind of the papacy, where a lot of times monarchs will take a new name upon becoming king or queen. This is happened a lot, I think, in English history too. So there's a very good chance that even though John is Aegon Targaryen the Sixth, he's king. He could just, if he wants to be king, he could just say, "I am John the First Stark." Who's going to stop him?
Well, exactly. And the other thing in terms of the crowning is that technically, certainly in English monarchy, you do not have to be crowned in order to be the king. So Edward VIII technically never had a coronation, but is still remembered as being a king until he abdicated. So for marrying an American, obviously, because, bad things happen when you marry Americans.
Don't do that.
It was the fact that she was a divorcee was the problem, actually, rather than the fact that she was American. Dan Good saying,
didn't help.
No, well, clearly not. Dan Good, no specific question, just a fan of it in Deep Geek. Thank you so much. Jeff Henry and Kristen Dale, thank you for the super chats. Bruce Savage, will the White Walkers lead from the front for the first time or hang back like every other time we have seen them? What do you reckon on that one?
They will lead from the back like they always do. I think that was just to be a cool scene. They wanted to show off how many White Walkers there actually were. Like, I think the last time we saw them, there was only like 4 or 5. There were much more in this scene. So I think that was just to establish that Winterfell is well and truly screwed at this point as the ending shot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would agree with that. And I think I'm going to call time on that now. Guys, we've overrun by a little bit. Priscilla N, thank you so much. I just spotted your super chat just quickly coming through. I think spoilers are just about, apparently there has been a leak now. So if we go off air now, then perhaps we can save people from some spoilers. Matt, do you want to remind everybody where they can find you on the internet?
Sure. You can find me on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Joe Magician. I recently put out part 2 of my theory, Killing of a Ranger. It's called The End of John's Song, The Killing of a Ranger. I'll put the link in the chat. And then after the episode, I'll be live on my channel for about an hour with a gray area before I have to go do Reddit mod things. That's why they're so short, if anybody's wondering. People go for hours afterwards. Why are mine short? I got things to do. Unfortunately, being a Reddit mod, it doesn't stop. And can also probably, I think we're going to do Maester Monthly next week. We skipped it this week because everyone was way too busy, but hopefully we'll be able to do that. And Watchers on the Wall, where I'm a feature writer. We're doing a thing called the Fandom Road, where people are writing their own little biography in the fandom. I'll be doing mine at some point. And I tend to put up just sort of random articles that I didn't have time to make into videos, end up on there as essays. So you can check those out too.
Excellent. I think the short answer for where can you find Matt on the internet is everywhere.
Everywhere, man. It's wherever.
Everywhere. Okay, guys, I say this every single time. Patrons, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I cannot do what I do without your support. That's what allows me to create the amount of videos that I do. My Thursday live streams, I do it through season, Sundays and Thursdays, Thursday ones all the way through the year. There I prioritize questions from my patrons, so patrons, get your questions in when I send up the link to that. If you're watching this back later and you want to watch some of my other videos on season 8, there will be a link appearing somewhere around here. If you're watching later and you are at all interested in supporting the channel on Patreon, getting access to a few exclusive things I do for my patrons, there will be a link appearing up here somewhere. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the fantastic chat I saw going on there. Thank you, Matt. Everybody, enjoy it. Don't get too traumatized by what I'm sure will be quite a traumatic episode, and we will see you on the other side. Take care. Bye.
Good night.